Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue à la 5e conversation. Good afternoon everyone and welcome to the 5th conversation of Paris Plus by Basel, Dragon Camp, the aesthetic of excess. We can barely contain our excitement at the site for incredible panel. So we have Stephen Cohen, a performer, visual artist and choreographer, Anthea Hamilton, artist, and last but not least, LaBruce, filmmaker, photographer, and writer. The talk will last 50 minutes, and you will have 10 minutes of questions. It will be moderated by Jordan Richman, a cultural director, editor, and writer. La conversation sera en français, mais vous avez la possibilité d'avoir une traduction live grâce au QR code qui se situe à l'entrée. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Charles and Pierre and Clement, for asking me to moderate this conversation, Dragon Camp, the Aesthetic of Excess. The essence of camp is its love of the unnatural, of artifice and exaggeration. From the decadent Dada heroine Elsa von Vertog to the influence of drag culture, Susan Sontag's words never cease to resonate throughout the history of forms, from performance to the visual arts. Through pastiche, distancing, and outrageousness, camp and drag culture have shaped generations of avant-gardes. At a time when the figure of the drag queen is being singled out by conservative circles, this panel will examine the political and aesthetic significance of this artistic register. For this conversation, I'm joined by Stephen Cohen, Anthea Hamilton, and LaBruce. Stephen Cohen was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and now lives in France. Performer, visual artist, and choreographer, he has orchestrated interventions in public places, art galleries, and on the stage. For these, Cohen dresses up, or rather metamorphoses into creatures as disconcerting as they are colorful. Through his interventions on stage or in public spaces, he disrupts the everyday and the mind, not to trip people up, but in order to challenge preconceived certitudes and take a united stance against the indifference currently gaining ground within our societies. Anthea Hamilton was born in London, where she continues to live and work. She was one of the 4 shortlisted artists for the 2016 Turner Prize. Her approach has often focused on extended studies of archives, scientific research, and popular culture, combining these with resonant images and objects in unusual and surreal ways. In addition, Hamilton consistently considers aspects of presentation beyond her objects and images, applying wallpaper, carpet, vinyl, and painted surfaces to the walls and floors, and introducing costume and performance within her work. LaBruce is a filmmaker, photographer, writer, and artist based in Toronto, Canada, and working internationally. Along with a number of short films, he has written and directed 14 feature films, which have won the Grand Prix at the Festival du Nouveau Cinema in Montreal, as well as the Teddy Award at the Berlinale. In Sontag's essay, Notes on Camp, she stated that to talk about camp is to therefore betray it. So let's get into our betrayal of camp with this discussion. I'll ask everyone to go around and please introduce themselves and describe their work's relationship to camp. Let's start with you, Bruce.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks to my the honored panel here. Not including myself. Yeah, I thought the best way to introduce my relationship to camp is to just show some very brief clips from 2 of my movies, Hustler White and The Raspberry Reich. I should say also that I wrote an article about 10 years ago called Notes on Camp, Anti-Camp, which kind of debunks Susan Sontag's famous article, Notes on Camp, and takes issue with very specific things in her analysis of camp, especially the fact that it's, she called it detached and apolitical, which blows my mind because I think camp is extremely political. So I'll just introduce myself by showing the clips, and then we'll move on to Anthea. Okay. Roll the clips.
According to my calculations, this strip of Santa Monica Boulevard is a hotbed of cruising activity. At least that's what it says in my Dameron Guide 2000.
Are you gay or straight? Are you gay or straight?
I heard you first time. Hi, I'm Monty. Montgomery Ward, how you doing?
Do you know this guy named Peter Festus?
No, why should I?
Well, I heard his car was missing.
Yeah, I didn't do nothing. I borrowed his car. I don't think he cared. I had to go on an errand, you know.
It also says that
His car in Plummer Park with a big dent on the side, blood stain.
I don't know nothing about that.
and there it is. Jürgen perceives the brief moment of eye contact as an encouraging sign. Kismet, love at first sight. To the boy, his glazed, fixed stare has just passed over the searching gaze of only one of 1,000 potential tricks of the day. It doesn't get... J'adore.
Let me put it in another way. The notion Marcuse calls surplus repression has to be fought by liberating ourselves from the constraints of dominant sexual practice. It's true that there will be no revolution without sexual revolution. But it's also true that there will be no sexual revolution without homosexual revolution. Do you know what I mean? Okay, let's take the girls of the SLA, for example, the Symbionese Liberation Army. Many of the girls were lesbians, but in the service of the revolution, they offered their own bodies to the sex-deprived black male prisoners of war as a progressive gesture of anti-racism and anti-sexism. And I want you to do the same.
Wait a minute, Gudrun. You're not saying that...
You want us to have sex with black men?
No, you idiot. I want you two to have sex with each other.
Are you out of your fucking mind? In case you've forgotten, I'm your boyfriend.
Don't be ridiculous. The revolution is my boyfriend.
I thought we were engaged.
Bourgeois marriage is nothing more than licensed prostitution. I don't want to have you as my pimp.
Anthea, would you like to go next?
Hi everybody. How should we do it? I'm sorry? Yeah? Okay. I'm just going to give quite like a straightforward introduction to the practice. I work by name predominantly in installations, most often within institutions. I kind of came by way of being an artist, not necessarily knowing that that was a job. I kind of was like aiming towards filmmaking or working in advertising. I think I just like the idea of trying to like make, what do you say? Finding solutions for problems, and then kind of the practice became more about finding what problems were, perhaps, within institutions. This is a, maybe, excuse me? Maybe I'll say when to, yeah, is that all right? Yeah, thank you. So this is a piece of work called The Squash, which was 2018, and the idea behind that was that there would be a performer in the space for the duration of 6 months, and so very much the role of the work was to think about what one could do, what I would have to do, why I was being asked, and making an institution like turn itself inside out to support this kind of work to happen, and it having like a very decorative aspect, but actually being kind of like riven with understanding the problems within institutions. But in the idea of my relationship to camp, I think it's something that I've always taken as I think maybe I've had the privilege of thinking it was just always there. Like I don't understand something not through the lens of camp. I think that's kind of just somehow how I think. Maybe we can go onwards. Yeah, thank you. This is a couple of images from the performance at the Bourse last night. I didn't necessarily have language when I was putting it together, and I made like a fake band. And so we have an actor as the lead singer, a kind of a performance artist student as the bassist, a sound production engine, a sound designer as the pianist, and Valentina Magaletti as the drummer. This idea of like, what does it mean to kind of make something in this hallowed space like the Bourse, like the kind of one of the best kind of musical platforms in the city, and just try and play at something. Maybe I'll come back to that later. Yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, keep going, thanks. Yeah, I work a lot with costume as a way most to protect the body or to kind of reframe the body, or like not necessarily see it as like a vertical, or change the idea of what scale can be in a body. I love vegetables. I think that they're really important, so they often feature in the work. You can go forward. Yeah, please. I think it's important for me. I'm quite like I need to collaborate very often. But that can be from I don't know, somebody I met in a social way to like a luxury fashion brand, and I kind of willfully try and keep it in a non-hierarchical. Whether that always works or not is a different question. But to me, it's the same to work with Loewe as to work with like Naïm and Alphonse. They're, I'm interested in power in that way. Yes, please. Keep going, thanks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. Mm-hmm. This is Karl Lagerfeld, the image of Karl Lagerfeld when he was younger. And I quite like that inside of that kind of format of the kind of the white ponytailed, high-collared image, there was this kind of more berry type of figure inside of that. It's like a seed, like a vegetable himself. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I use my own body in these kind of like hidden ways. So those are my legs. There's a pictures of John Travolta postcard I found when I kind of went AWOL from like a school trip to New York. I was meant to be at the Guggenheim, and we just went downtown and just had like a very free time. This idea of like not observing what we're meant to be doing and kind of finding textures elsewhere. Thank you. Next. I think I'm very, very interested in images and how images function and how images are constructed. And I'm kind of very much like charting my own desires and how that's been kind of generated in me as a woman born in like the late 70s from biracial, with having like parents from like different ethnicities in the UK. And so it's like, what has happened, or how could I not but be kind of have this kind of, I don't know, classically handsome Vitruvian male form as part of my kind of library of what I'm attracted to. Sorry? Yeah, and then, yeah. I use scale a lot, just to kind of, I don't know, why not? It's fun. Yeah, you can keep going. Yes, please. I do a lot of kind of cross-cultural referencing in a very kind of willfully on my terms way. So I made a lot of kimonos. I was thinking about different speeds, different paces, different ways of rationalizing ideas. So these are kind of a series of food photography photos on kimonos. And then also there's like a commitment to materials, textures, and yeah, I really like sitting next to Stephen because it's like a feast of wanting to like reach out and like pour at you, which I might do later. But yeah, it's kind of quite geeky in that way. Thank you. We can go on to the next one. Yeah, I don't need to say anything about that. That's fine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I quite like the idea of camouflage. I had a conversation with Cedric Folk about 2 years about this idea of what camouflage can be. And this idea of, this is a suit which is a kind of a direct reference to like a Moschino suit, 1997, autumn-winter collection, which maybe also might be understood as a reference to David Byrne, I forgot the name of the designer of that, but this idea that you can miss something in popular culture or you can go into another thing, but I'm really interested in like a kind of the cross currents of things like that. But I thought that maybe a brick suit was the best way to be visible in a city, not invisible in a city. That's good. It's the last one. Great, thank you. Yeah.
And last, Stephen Cohen.
Yeah, you're going to do it from there.
So I don't really talk about my work. I talk through my work. So I just want to show you images. I hope they're not too many. It's like a retrospective. And there's too much light. Yeah. You're famous.
Poetry. Los dos. Aku ikut kemarin. Dia seperti betul. Orang itu dansa. Dia seperti betul. Los dos.
Sind Sie wahnsinnig? Nein. Nee, bitte. Entschuldigung. Aber das geht doch wohl mit der Verbandszeug.
Hey, das geht doch nicht. Hey, hör auf, bitte. Das kann doch nicht wahr sein. Nein, nicht angreifen. Bitte nicht, hören Sie auf.
Why do we love so much and find so appealing the unnatural, the artifice, and exaggeration?
Are you asking me?
I'm opening it up to everyone.
Anthea.
I think the word that I got from that was like the artificial. That was like the one that kind of was the most kind of highest peak for me. Yeah. I think, I don't think I question, to me there's not a sense that everything isn't artificial in a way, you know, like, or everything could be equally correct, or not correct, but like actual. So I've never kind of drawn that line between artifice or not, or I very much think that it's just, I don't know how you'd say, like trends. But it may be just like personal trends or different ways of understanding something. Like it might be that something's very true to you in one moment and you invest in it and then you realize it was total nonsense. But you kind of carry that kind of like residue of that within you. And so for that, I'm always I don't know, looking for the artificial somehow as like a space to kind of test out myself. I think I also really believe in like a willful decadence. I think that for me is like a very important space to hold, this idea of just pushing for more and more within a practice and making the others I work with sometimes quite uncomfortable because I can't always like articulate why I need it or why it might be beneficial for others. And it's just like holding that space of artificiality, of suspense, until the thing comes through. And it's not necessarily like a proof, it's more just like a share with me, like join me in like seeing things on another kind of a set of parameters also. Yeah.
And Bruce and Stephen, would you say there are elements of exaggeration within both of your works?
Not me.
I don't know. The is this working? Yeah. The idea, we're talking about drag too as well, and I mean the idea of gender as performative. I mean, if you start with that idea, then everything is performative. Everything is artificial. Everything is drag, right? So people who write about camp have talked about in queer terms how the two kind of most prominent expressions of drag are kind of like a male acting out of extreme femininity, a fantasy of the extremely feminine, or you also have the flamboyant queen who's hyper, who's queenie, and then you have the performance of masculinity, which is all over Instagram now, like the ultimate like masculine kind of bodybuilder or like thirst trap or whatever. So those are the two kind of extreme performances of gender now on Instagram, and in that's always been the case in gay terms. So I mean, it's also like the idea of complete of an expression that is coded, that is beyond the grasp of the mainstream or beyond the kind of heteronormative grasp, which I think is something that is hard to maintain now because everything is artificial and extreme now. The idea of pushing everything to the limit, the limits of representation, the maximalism of everything today, drag doesn't kind of stand out the way it used to, in a way historically, where it was an expression of extreme difference, and kind of like, it also had its kind of esoteric side where it was like a secret code or language that was shared between queer people, and now it doesn't really have the same impact because it's partly because it's been co-opted by the mainstream, and also because it doesn't stand out because everything is exaggerated now. Everything is over the top, in fashion, in music, in pop culture. Yeah.
I think we need to reclaim drag. I don't think the job of drag is to read to children. I think it's to scare the shit out of families. And I don't think what we make is as extreme as what we find out there in reality. You know, I didn't invent a squatter camp to wear a chandelier. I didn't invent an abattoir to look like I'm drowning in blood. I think the real horror is in the real, and the artificial enhances the real, and it's the mix of artificial and real, which is my way of making art. And I don't know what I'm doing on the panel, because for me this isn't drag. This is art. It's about beautiful things, interesting things, like you said, textures and stuff. You know, I'm not singing and dancing and putting you down and getting the upper hand and entertaining you. I don't know what drag is. My only relationship to camp is concentration camp, because it defined my identity. I'm born in South Africa because my grandparents fled persecution in Europe, so let the people who know talk.
In Sontag's notes on camp, she states that camp is neutral to content and thereby disengaged, depoliticized, or at least apolitical. Do we agree with that?
Well, I certainly don't. And I wrote a rebuttal to Susan Sontag's notes on camp called Notes on Camp, Anti-Camp about 10 years ago. And that was, I took issue with quite a few things that she said in her article, but that was one of the main ones, that I think camp is extremely political. I think it started out as, like, as I was saying, as a practice of queer signification. It was also class-based. I mean, it was usually, you know, drag queens in crappy bars or in marginalized, like, spaces performing. And also a real element of camp has always been, you know, filmmakers like Jack Smith or even Warhol in the 60s or James Bidgood, who did Pink Narcissus. It's like gathering trash and making something beautiful out of it, like just the Kemper Fowler's idea of availabism, just like using whatever you find around, lying around, and like making it into some fabulous costume, which was part of the fun of it, and it was also a political kind of reality where these marginalized people couldn't buy expensive fabric and had no access to make a living from what they love to do, so they just did it out of pure necessity and pure love of artifice and self-expression. So I mean, I think drag has become extremely McDonaldification now. It's like franchised. It's like, and it's been co-opted and for a completely kind of capitalist kind of. Corporate kind of like reality, as opposed to this kind of beautiful idea of just necessity being the mother of invention and using whatever you can with what you have to create something beautiful.
Yeah, I think I love that idea of availability, you know, like this kind of urgency or necessity to like hold on, or like to kind of pile that stuff up as like a way to keep yourself sustained. I'm only going to talk about things from my practice. I know why I'm here, and I also don't know quite why I'm here. You know,
I don't know why I'm here either. No,
Great.
I'm the only one who knows why they're here, because I'm very campy.
Okay, so.
Do you know why you? Can I say something quickly? I think there's a very good article written by Camille Paglia called Sontag, Bloody Sontag. Worth reading.
Access. I was thinking about how I use access within what I do. I was thinking about the idea of what a drag might be, or what camp might be. And I was wondering if I could like position that maybe sometimes what I do is like institutional drag, like it looks like I'm doing an exhibition, but in fact what I'm doing is like messing things up elsewhere. And so there's this idea of maybe like passing with me when I go in to do things. And then, or there being, I often think about the request with myself. It's like when I'm asked to do something, on what terms is it, and how can I then twist that, or how can it seem like I'm appearing to be doing something and performing that, but like living elsewhere with that. And so often when I work in spaces, then I agree with you that it's completely not apolitical. But sometimes if you can you go into these spaces and they assume that you are apolitical, but then you kind of...
As a strategy, it's interesting because it is deceptively superficial, but people refer to it as a profound superficiality. Like I think Warhol said, he's profoundly or deeply superficial. So this idea that it's something meretricious, that it's disposable, that it's something ephemeral, that and kind of throw away and just pull together at the last minute or whatever, and that then that is a kind of a, and then you can slip in all sorts of political kind of ideas or content within that, because people are kind of don't have their defenses up, and they're not they don't realize that you're doing something actually deeply political.
I think with me, I would also try and do that in a kind of, how can you say, contractual way. It's like, yeah, everybody has to have like proper breaks, or everybody has to have, get paid X according to this, or, it's more on like thinking about the actual people passing through that. And sometimes when those things get lodged in spaces, then it's hard to then retract it, because then you can whisper to your friend, you can actually get like them to be paid properly, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of also playing in those ways, or kind of hiding that.
Did I look needy? I also think, let's not forget that it's drag queens who started a queer revolution. And drag queens have got the balls to throw stones at men with guns. And there's all kind of drag. And fuck RuPaul too, who said, I heard an interview where he said he's not looking for dark freak drag, because there's lots of that out there. And he also said, no trannies. And for someone who started off radical, running up to receive an Emmy, I mean, you're never going to get one.
I hope not. I sincerely hope not. That would be too camp.
Bruce, you mentioned the essay that you wrote in 2012, Notes on Camp, Anti-Camp, arguing for a broader definition of camp. Why was it necessary then to respond to Sontag's text?
Well, I mean, my argument was basically that in the 90s, the kind of ideological white noise was irony. And suddenly in the 90s, everyone became ironic. They had this idea of ironic detachment from everything, which was a posture or a pose. But then somehow people lost track of their irony, and they were kind of saying things that were diametrically opposed to their authentic beliefs, and as if it was ironic, and then they were actually lost track of what their authentic beliefs were, and they were just ironic all the time, right? And so then I think from that came, out of that sensibility came really the era of Trump and the alt-right co-opting irony and these kind of punk contradictions and kind of this political correctness, is now more of a right-wing phenomenon. So what I'm talking about is how everything is camp now. Like camp, it took over from irony as the default sensibility, and you see it everywhere. And conservatives are the biggest camp kind of icons that there are now. Like not only Trump, but these crazy senators like Boebert and in the States, or like these. They're doing a performance of politics, but it's not. They don't believe in what they're saying. It's just like a kind of artificial posture to give it as much attention as they can. People like Newt Gingrich was one, or all these kind of like radio disc jockeys and stuff who are right wing are actually camp, the new camp, So in that context, I agree with Stephen that camp and drag have to be reclaimed by queer people, because the political roots of it have been completely forgotten. And it's kind of now that it's just this idea of excess, taking the most extreme posture, being maximalist. That is what, without any kind of taking all these kind of taking all these cues from the origins of queer camp, but completely separating it from the original intent or signification. So.
If camp is completely mainstream, is drag always camp, Stephen?
Sorry, what is the question?
I'm asking if drag is always camp.
Well, like I said, I don't know what drag is. Is drag singing and dancing in a bar? Is drag entertainment? Is drag pure politics? Where you wear a dress makes the context, you know? I wear a dress to meet the neo-Nazis or to, meet the French police. Or I think context defines everything. And I've been dismissed in the art world as a sham because of the attention I pay to making a piece of shit on my head that takes me 2 days out of bits of wire. But to me, that's the job of an artist. I hate what's happening in art, that everything's being commodified and commercialized and Louis Vuittonized, and that's what young artists want. And young artists think, I think, because I do a lot of workshops, that the only work you need to make is on Instagram. There's nothing dangerous to do on Instagram. And artists need to do the dangerous things. And it doesn't mean you have to go with your dick out attached to a rooster to the Eiffel Tower, because I think what you do is dangerous. And you. And I'd say let's talk about art rather than talk about camp and drag, but talking about art is like a photocopy of a fuck. Just make art.
Anthea, there's a large element of costuming in your work. Do you think this has a camp sensibility?
Maybe, but I don't do it for that purpose. I think my instinct, whenever I've kind of thought about costuming, somebody that has agreed to be in something that I kind of will then send out, is to just make them feel really special, like making someone like like, I don't know what you call it, like if you go into a pageant or something, like it's just this thing of, it's going to be really horrible, probably what you're going to experience, like being subject to kind of like a institutional audience. They're going to be so needy, they're going to be like so consumptive on you, that I just want to make you the nicest dress that I can, or like, make you a nice cup of tea. It's kind of, it's more like that, and then in some ways it becomes an armor also, because I understand that images do dominate, or it's hard to, we're kind of losing a capacity not to just take what we see as the top line on how to read something, and so it also gives them like a way of going under the radar in those spaces too. But then it also then allows me to enjoy materials as well. So it's I kind of feel like I get the best of both worlds, but it's always just it's quite devotional in that way.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. Does anyone like to ask a question?
Or make a comment.
I have a question for let's just give you the microphone.
Thank you for this insightful conversation. I know Anthea's work quite well. I know Bruce's work a little bit. I know Stephen's work very little, but I'm very interested in it. And you work in very specific mediums that sometimes overlap, but are quite distinct. So my question is, do you think there's a medium specificity to camp, or do you think there's a way that you think about it, or that it appears in your work as a pure presence, or as something which other people can see and interact with, that is that has a specificity that couldn't be any other way, and that can be defined? And the answer could be no, but I'm very tempted because I know that you have 3 practices that are each very singular and that begin from different points and then intersect, if that makes sense.
Maybe I've got an answer, so I'm just going to say something. I was thinking that maybe humor is material that might live across all of our practices. And and then I guess there's this kind of like slippery idea of how intentional that humor is also, which I'm never sure about. Like, if we can see that it's funny, we can see how it's going to make other people respond to our humor, but then I get stuck after that. So maybe.
And it's not always ironic. I mean, a lot of camp is just humorous. It's funny. It's like it doesn't have to be an ironic kind of comment on something, or it's just there's something inherently funny about camp.
I'm really glad you don't know my work, because it just, I'm marginalized, and let me weaponize unsuccess. Irony. Business days for irony in art.
I mean, I try not to be campy sometimes. Like, like I made a movie recently called Saint Narcisse, which I co-wrote and directed, about twincest, about twins who are separated at birth, who get together in their 20s and hook up sexually. And I kind of wrote it very kind of like in a way, like a more straightforward kind of genre movie. And then when I used like really professional, good actors who quite often I work with non-professionals, and that adds usually a kind of maybe campy aspect to my movies, because the line deliveries are so bad that people think, oh, the acting is so bad, it's campy. And it's like, well, actually, they're non-actors. They're doing the best. Actually, they did really well. They're acting really well for what they, as non-professionals. But these professional actors were asking me if they should sort of like play into the roles more ironically and stuff. And I said, no, just play it absolutely straight. Just play it dramatically straight. Because I think camp quite often plays better straight. You don't have to, it's already campy, you don't have to wink at the audience and nudge them and say, oh, this is ironic. And, it's sometimes just good to just play it absolutely straight. And so, which I think really makes the film work, and it is, and then sometimes it is emotionally affecting. Camp is supposed to be detached, according to Sontag, and disengaged, and I think actually camp can be quite the opposite. It can be emotional, it can be very engaging. It actually is this idea almost of the tears of a clown or something, or something deep going on behind this artifice. Something emotional. So yeah, I think whatever I do ends up being camp, but I've learned to embrace it and not be ashamed of it.
Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
Can I just say that I think also what crosses our work and is characteristic of each of us is fucking hard work. 14 movies, epic installations, beautifully made, and 40 years of supporting critical humiliation and not giving a shit about it. So we are survivors. That's camp.
Following the talk, Anthea will be having an event for her book nearby at La Pearl, so everyone's welcome to join.
Yay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.